This is part 4 of topic 12, and in this topic we're looking at global imbalances. Now, global imbalances, or a global imbalance, does exist in the world at the moment, and the form it's taken is persistent current account deficits, primarily in the Western countries, that is the United States and Europe, and persistent current account surpluses in China, Japan, emerging Asia, and many of the oil exporting countries. Now, this is the situation of global imbalances is quite a concern, and I encourage you to do some additional reading on global imbalances and really get a handle on, first of all, what global imbalances are, and second of all, why they are a problem. Now, to get a better handle on global imbalances, I've got a situation here where the US and China have a large trade imbalance. Now, this is from September 2009, so it's quite some time ago now, but it's really the diagram that I want you to focus on. The situation that these two countries have been in, and there is an imbalance between these two countries, as well as more of a broader global imbalance. But let's just focus on the imbalance between these two countries for now. The US is importing large amounts of goods and services from China, but the exports are small compared to the imports. So if we look at this situation, then America is running a current account deficit with China, and China is running a current account surplus. Now, what's the problem associated with this? Well, to understand that, we've got to realize that in the balance of payments, if America is running a current account deficit with China, it must be running a capital financial account surplus. Now, let's just for now imagine that there are only two countries in the world, the US and China. Now, if America is running a current account deficit, it must be running offsetting capital financial account surplus, and that surplus means there must be investment funds flowing from China into America. Now, global imbalances occurs or really become a problem when this situation goes on for year after year after year after year, and that's what's been happening in recent years. In fact, since the early 2000s, America's been running big trade or current account deficits, and China, just as an example, has been running current account surpluses. Now, that must mean that while America is running a current account deficit, it's running a capital financial account surplus. So that capital financial account surplus means that China is sending a lot of investment money to the US. Now, that money that has been flowing from China to the US, a lot of it has been flowing into America's bond market, typically government bonds, but also, to a lesser extent, corporate bonds as well. Now, in this diagram, they've posed the question, how long can this go on? How long can it go on? Because eventually China is going to limit, or want to limit, the amount of investment money that it sends to America. And when the amount of investment money that it sends to America stops, then America's ability to import from China must stop as well. Think of it another way. This is more of a representation of the global situation now. What we've got is the US and some other current account deficit countries running, since the early 2000s, very large current account deficits. And we've had China, Asia, Germany and Japan, and the oil exporters running very big current account surpluses. And the forecast back in 2008, 2009 were for these large deficits in the US and the surpluses in the blue countries to continue. Now, this situation of large deficits in one country and offsetting surpluses in another country isn't a problem if it occurs for 1 or 2 years, but it hasn't. It's been going on for years and years and years, since the early 2000s. The other thing to remember is that we're not just looking at current account deficits on the bottom and surpluses on the top. We also have to think about the underlying financial flows which go along with these current account balances. So if we have current account deficits in the US and some of these other countries represented by the red, and we have surpluses in these blue countries, that is China, Asia, Germany, Japan, and the oil exporters, it also implies that these countries on top, the countries in blue, are effectively lending money to the current account deficit countries. They're lending money in the form of financial investment going from the countries on top to the US and the other current account deficit countries. Now, this builds up dangerous imbalances in the global economy because China, Asia, Germany, Japan, and the oil exporters, year after year after year, are effectively sending foreign investment money to America and the other countries in red. And so they are building up, each year they're building up larger and larger net asset positions in these countries. And eventually that's going to be quite dangerous because those countries in blue are really exposed to the bond markets in America. They have a significant amount of money invested in the bond markets in America. So how much have they got invested? Well, most recent figures suggest that China and Japan have around about $1 trillion each invested in America's bond market. Germany has smaller amounts than that. The rest of emerging Asia have smaller amounts, but we're talking trillions of dollars in total which have been loaned over this period by the countries in blue to mainly America and other current account deficit countries. Now, eventually the willingness of these countries in blue to continue financing America's current account deficit is going to stop, and that then is going to force some quite painful adjustments in terms of the global economy. Now, why is it that money is flowing from China, Asia, Germany, and Japan to America? We've seen that, we've sort of seen the current account side of this story, but now let's think about the investment flow side of this story. Let's have a look at the United States. The United States has, the blue line is savings, the red line is investment, and these two time series are measured on the right-hand axis as a percentage of GDP. So the very last year that we have data for in this diagram, the blue series savings looks like around about 13.8% of GDP. So savings were 13.8% of GDP. The yellow columns, they are measured on the right-hand axis as a percentage of GDP as well. Now in America, we can see that savings is far less than investment. That then leads to current account deficits, because in America what's happening is the shortage of savings causes an inflow of foreign savings that appreciates the exchange rate, and America then runs a current account deficit as a result. So America has been drawing on foreign savings to fund its savings investment gap. So where has this money been coming from? Well, first of all, Japan. Savings is greater than investment. They send a large part of that money to America. As they send that money to America, it increases the supply of yen in the foreign exchange market. It holds the value of the yen down, lower than it would have been otherwise, and it helps Japan run a current account surplus. So some of that money is coming from Japan. If we go ahead, some of that money is also coming from China. China is in a situation where savings are greater than investment. Domestic savings greater than domestic investment. That allows China to send the excess savings overseas. Most of that money has been going to America. In East Asia, after the East Asian financial crisis in 1997-98, investment really dropped sharply, and East Asia from the early 2000 onwards, they also were in a situation where domestic savings were greater than domestic investment. They were sending the difference, the excess savings, to America as well. And we have the oil producers here. Since around about 2000, the oil producers have had savings which are greater than investment. They've been sending that money to the United States as well.